Hi everyone in Algebra 2B. Today we're going to be going over the new material for lesson 105. And also included in this is there's going to be problems that are going to be done for 105B. So make sure you watch the entirety of the video. I know it's going to be a little bit longer, but this will include problems from 104A and 104B. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to begin with something called advanced factoring. So we're going to be given an equation that looks something like this. So 6x squared minus 5x minus 6. And what we're going to do is we're going to factor this into two separate equations, two separate expressions. And what I need you to do is we're going to actually follow 5 steps to do this. And I would take notes on this because this is something that you can use when we're going through these types of problems. So number 1 is to multiply the first term by the last term. So put it in descending order and then you multiply the first term times the last term. So that's what I've done is I've taken the 6 and the negative 6 and I multiplied them. I got negative 36. Your second step is to find the factors of this number that add up to the middle number. So I want to find the factors of negative 36 that are going to add up to negative 5. Okay, so I tried a couple. I did 6 and negative 6, negative 18 and 2. That adds up to negative 16. And then I did negative 9 times 4, which negative 9 times 4 is negative 36, but that also adds up to negative 5, which happens to be what our middle term is equal to. So now I know what my two factors are going to be, and these are going to now be my two middle terms. So in step 3, you'll notice that I'm going to attach an x to both of these terms and add it in between in place of this negative 5x. So it's taking the place of the negative 5x. I have negative 9x and then plus 4. Now what we're going to do is we're going to factor this expression. So we're going to take the first two terms and then the second two terms. So first two terms and second two terms, and you're going to factor this expression. So if I look, I have 6x squared minus 9x and then plus 4x minus 6. And then what you're going to do is you're going to find the common factor between both of those parentheses. So for this one, there's a 3 and that could divide both of these terms and an x that could divide both of those terms. So I factor the 3x out. I'm left with 2x for the first term and then minus 3 for the second term. Now for the 4x minus 6, I notice that both of those terms are divisible by 2. So I factored out a 2. And then I'm left with 2x minus 3 in the parentheses. So you should see that that's common. There's a 2x minus 3 now in parentheses. We're going to factor out the like expression, which is the 2x minus 3. And then you're just left with the 3x plus 2. And that is your factored out equation. So that's what advanced factoring looks like. I know it looks a little tricky, but really you just need to be able to factor and follow all 5 of these steps. So we're going to be using these 5 steps to go through some of our problems. So the first one we have is 6x squared plus x minus 2. So the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to multiply the first term times the last term. So step number 1, I'm going to multiply 6 times negative 2, which gives me negative 12. Now I want to raise this up a little bit, so hopefully we can try and get our notes in there. Okay, so now we're going to find the factors of this negative 12 that add up to the middle term. Okay, so I have to find the factors that are going to add up. So factors of negative 12 that are going to add up to positive 1. So step number 2, let me try. So factors of negative 12. Well, I could do 4 and negative 3, but that adds up to 1. Oops, that was the one. Let's try another one, but negative 2, and let's try 6, but that adds up to 4. So we wanted to add up to this coefficient right here, which was 1. So I actually did it on the first guess. So now these two terms are going to become my two middle terms. So the two numbers that I come up with are going to become my two middle terms. So I'm going to rewrite this equation. So number 3, so it's going to replace the x. It's going to become 6x squared plus 4x minus 3x, and then minus 2. Okay, and now we're going to separate that into two parentheses, so the first two terms and then the second two terms, and we're going to factor that expression. So step number 4, we're going to put 6x squared plus 4x, and then I'm actually going to factor out the minus sign, or I'm going to do plus, and then I'll do minus 3x and then minus 2. So the only thing that I can factor out of the first term is that both of those terms are divisible by 2 and an x. So that would leave me with 3x in the first term and then plus 2 in the second term. In my second parentheses, I'm actually going to factor out a -1. And that would leave me with positive 3x and then plus 2. So step 4 was to factor this expression. And then step 5 is to factor out the like expression. In this case, my like expression is going to be the 3x plus 2. So my answer is going to be 3x plus 2 times 2x minus 1. And that is your result. Okay, so we're going to follow those steps again in 105.2. So the first step is going to be, so I hope you wrote those steps down because we are going to be using them. And I don't want to keep flipping back to it, so please make sure you had written those steps down. So the first step is going to be to multiply the first term and the last term. So step number 1 is to multiply 2 times -15, and that's going to give me -30. Step 2 is to find the factors of that number that add up to this middle number, which is going to be -7. So I need to think of the factors of -30. So I could do 6 and -5, but that adds up to 1. I could do 15 and 2. Let's do 15 and -2, but that adds up to 13. And then what about 3 and 10? So we can do -10 and then +3, and that adds up to -7, which is exactly what I want it to add up to, which is -7. So now these two are going to become my two middle terms. So step number 3, I have 2x squared, and then I'm going to put my -10x, and then my plus 3x, and then -15. And we're going to factor this expression, so I'm going to put the first two terms together. So it's going to be 2x squared minus 10x, and then 3x minus 15. So we're going to factor those two terms. So when I factor out of these first two parentheses, or the first parentheses, I see that both of those terms are divisible by 2 and an x, which would leave me with just an x in the first term and then a -5 in the second term. For the second parentheses, I see that both of those terms are divisible by 3. So then I have x minus 5 left in parentheses. And then your final step, when you're asked to just factor, is to take out the common terms, which would be the x minus 5. That would be your first parenthesis, and then your second parenthesis is going to be what's left, which is the 2x plus 3. And that is your result. Okay. So now moving on, we're going to look at 105.3. In 105.3, they actually ask you to factor to find the solutions of this number. So what we need to do is we're going to set this equal to 0, and then we're going to factor it, but then we need to also solve for x. So I'm going to start by moving the 6x squared to the left. So that would give me positive 6x squared minus 5x minus 6 equals 0. Now I'm going to multiply the first term by the last term, so that would be 6 times negative 6, which is negative 36. And step 2 is to find the factors of this number that add up to the middle term. So I need it to add up to this middle term, which is negative 5. So step number 2 is to find those factors. So I could do negative 18 and 2. That adds up to negative 16. I could do, let's do negative 9 and 4. And that adds up to negative 5, which is perfect. So these are going to be my two middle terms now. So it's going to replace the negative 5x. So step number 3 is to rewrite that as 6x squared minus 9x plus 4x and then minus 6 equals 0. And now you're going to separate it. So these two are going to become a pair, and then these two are going to become a pair. So in parentheses, I'd have 6x squared minus 9x, and then plus, in parentheses, 4x minus 6. And the only thing that divides both of those terms would be a 3 and an x. So that would leave me with 2x in the first term and then minus 3 in the second term. For my second parentheses, the only thing that divides both of those terms would be 2. So that would be 2x minus 3. So now what you're going to do is you are going to factor this. So you see that there's a common 2x minus 3, so that becomes your first parentheses. 2x minus 3 times 3x plus 2. But the difference for this one, it says to find the solutions, which means we actually have to solve for x. So now that we've factored it, now you have to do two separate equations. We're going to set 2x minus 3 equal to 0. And then we're going to set 3x plus 2 equal to 0, and then solve for x. So when I move the 3 to the other side, I'm going to add 3. So I have 2x is equal to 3. So therefore, x is equal to 3 over 2. So make sure you're reading the question carefully. This one actually said to solve, or factor to find the solution. So solving. This one, if I move the 2 to the other side, it becomes negative 2. So I have 3x equals negative 2. So therefore, x is going to be equal to negative 2/3. And those would be your two answers. So you have to factor, but you also have to find the solution. So that is 105.3, the example. Now what we're going to do from the first half of the lesson for 105A, what I want you to do is I want you to pause the video and I want you to attempt numbers 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and 11. And then we're going to do those together. So 6, 7, 8, or so 6 through 11 basically. And those are just going over problems that we have done recently. Okay, so for the first one, number 6, we have to find g plus h of 2, where g of x is equal to x squared plus 1. The domain is integers. And then h of x is equal to x minus 5, where the domain is reals. So the biggest thing we have to make sure, so I'm going to start just by adding those two equations together. So it's going to be g plus h of 2. So I'm just going to take my g function, which is x squared plus 1, and I'm going to add that to x minus 5. So when I add that together, the only things I can combine would be the 1 and the negative 5, but that would give me x squared plus x minus 4. Before I actually plug in the number though, it says that the domain for the new equation is all the numbers that were common in both original domains. So that was from my notes from 102. So I need to make sure, does 2 fit within the domain of the g equation? And it's an integer, so it does fit. Then I need to check if 2 is in the second domain, which is reals, and it does fit there. So I actually now I'm just going to take that 2 and plug it into the equation, replacing all my x's with 2. So I get 4 plus 2 minus 4, and that gives me a result of 2. Okay, and that concludes number 6. Now moving on to number 7. So number 7 says find h(g) of x for the function defined in number 6. So what I'm doing is I'm just taking my two functions, h(g), and multiplying them. So my original h function was x minus 5, and my g function is x squared plus 1. So I just used the functions that I got in number 6. And now we just need to multiply them out. So x times x squared would give me x cubed. X times 1 is just x. Negative 5 times x squared would be negative 5x squared. And then negative 5 times 1. And you want to write this in descending order. So your result would be x cubed minus 5x squared plus x minus 5. And that would be your result for this one. So this one you didn't have to check your domains because you're not actually plugging in anything into that function. Okay, so you're not plugging anything in. All they asked you to do was to multiply. Okay, so now what we're going to do is do number 8. So for number 8, what we're going to do is this applies to one of the lessons that we just did. So it's lesson 104. So we're going to be writing these numbers as a fraction. So for this one is a repeating decimal. So my number is going to be, n is going to be equal to 0.00001, 2, 3, 4, 2, 3, 4, 2, 3, 4. It's just going to repeat. And basically what we want is we're going to multiply this by the number that would move the 2, 3, 4 over, so that it's over in this space over here. So that means I need to multiply this by 1,000. So it's going to be 1,000. And if I multiply by 1,000, 1, 2, 3. So that's going to become 0.123 4, 2, 3, 4, 2, 3, 4. And it's just going to keep repeating. So when I subtract my 1,000n from my n, the 2, 3, 4s are going to cancel and all the repeating. When I subtract n from 1,000, I get 999. N, and that's going to be equal to 0.1234 minus 0.0001. And that's going to give me 0.1233. So if I'm solving for n, I'm going to divide both sides by 99. And I need to make this into a whole number. So what I need to do is I need to move this decimal place over 1, 2, 3, 4, which means I need to move this over 1, 2, 3, 4, which means that my fraction is going to turn into 1,233 over 999 with 4 zeros. 1, 2, 3, 4. And that right there would be your result. Okay, and that's for number 8. Now for number 9, it's another similar problem. And then for this one, so n is going to be equal to this number with the repeating decimal. So n is going to be equal to 0.01651651651. And what I need to do is I need to multiply this so that the decimal number, the 651, would come over 3 spaces. So I need to multiply this by 1,000 again. So this would be 1,000. N is going to be equal to, so 1, 2, 3. So that would be 16.51651,651. And that's going to repeat. So now what we're going to do, I know it's kind of hard to see, but we're going to subtract the n from the 1,000 n again. So that gives me 999 n. And then when I subtract so the 651s are going to cancel and the repeating decimals. So it's going to be 16.51 minus 0.01. And that would just give me 16.5. And then we're going to divide both sides by 999. Then I need to move the decimal point over 1 space, so 1 space. So my number is going to be 165 over 9,990. Okay, and that concludes number 9. Now moving on, we're going to look at number 10. So number 10 is just long division. So we're going to set this up by doing m plus p divided by, starting off with m cubed, then leave a space for the m squared, and leave a space for the m, and then plus p cubed at the end. Now when I divide m cubed by n, I get m squared. When I multiply it, I'm going to get m cubed. Multiply this by m squared, which could give me pm squared. Don't forget though that you're subtracting. So the m cubes will cancel. This will just become negative pm squared. And carry down my next term. When I divide this by m, that lowers the power by 1, so I get negative pm. Multiply that by the m would be negative pm squared. Multiply it by p would be negative p squared m. But remember, you have to change both of those signs, so this becomes positive. Your pm squareds are going to cancel. And you get p squared m plus p cubed. Now I'm going to lower this power again by m by dividing it by m, which would give me plus p squared. When I multiply it, I get p squared m. And when I multiply p squared times p, I get p cubed. But you are going to be subtracting those terms. So not only does the p squared m cancel, but so does the p cubed, which means your result is going to be m squared minus pm plus p squared. Okay, and we're going to do the same thing for number 11. So for number 11, it's pretty much the same problem. Actually, it's almost exactly the same problem. Let me make sure I wrote that down right. So it's x cubed plus y cubed. Well, your answer is going to be almost exactly the same, except with x and y. So I'm going to have x plus y. I'm dividing this by x cubed is my first term. Leave a space for the x squared term. Leave a space for the 0x, and then add the y cubed at the end. Now, when you divide x cubed by x, you get x squared. Now, x squared times x would give me x cubed. X squared times y would be x squared y. You do need to change the signs though, so this is going to become negative, this is going to become negative. The x cubes are going to cancel. Then I'm going to be left with negative x squared y plus 0x. Divide this term by x again, which would give me negative xy. When you multiply it, it's going to be negative x squared y and then negative xy squared. But again, you're going to be subtracting, so this is going to become positive and this is going to become positive, and they cancel. Then you're left with xy squared and then plus y cubed. So when I divide this by x, you're just left with the y squared. And when you multiply y squared times x, you would get xy squared. When you multiply y squared times y, you get y cubed. And then you're going to subtract. And both of those terms cancel, meaning your answer is going to be x squared minus xy plus y squared. So now we're going to kind of move into 105 part B because these are going to be our new problems. So I wanted to do numbers 21 through 26 with you, and then in addition number 30. So I will really know if you paid attention to the video if you asked for these questions. So number 21, we're going to start by looking to see if there's anything I can factor out. And indeed there is actually something I can factor out. I can take out an x out of each of these terms. And I want to write this in descending order. So if I take away an x, this is going to become 3x. If I take away from the 5x squared, it's going to be negative 5. Sorry, that would be 3x squared. So it would be negative 5x, and this would be negative 2, and that's going to be set equal to 0. Now we're going to follow the same terms that we were working on today. So you're going to multiply the first term by the last term. So we're going to do 3 times negative 2, which is negative 6. And I'm trying to find the multiples of this number that are going to add up to this term right here. And there's actually only one, well, yeah, there's only, it's going to be negative 6 times positive 1, which is going to give me negative, well, it'll give you negative 5 when you add them. So step number 3 is to be, those are now going to be your middle terms. So these two are going to replace your negative 5x. So this would be x times 3x minus 6x plus 1x minus 2 equals 0. Now remember, your first two are going to become a parenthesis and your second two are going to become a parenthesis. So this is going to become x and then 3x minus 6x. That should be x squared. And then plus x minus 2. Okay, so for this one, should be in brackets, sorry. So now I can factor out of this term a 3 and an x. So I would have x, and then in my bracket, I would take away a 3x, and this would become x minus 2, and then plus x minus 2. So there's nothing I could have factored out of that second term, so I'm just going to say it's a 1. And now I have x minus 2, and then I am left with the 3x plus 1. So this whole thing is going to turn into x times x minus 2 times 3x plus 1 equals 0. So now to solve for x, we're going to set each of these parentheses equal to 0. So my first one is going to be x is equal to 0. My second one is going to be x minus 2 equals 0, which means x is equal to 2. And my last one is going to be 3x plus 1 equals 0. So when I move the 1, I would subtract it. So I have 3x equals negative 1. So x is negative 1/3. So your answer is going to be negative 1/3, 0, and 2. Okay, so that's all about factoring. So it's all based off of our advanced factoring that we just did. So for number 10, or 22, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to write this in descending order. So I have 6x squared minus 10x and then minus 4 equals 0. I'm going to start by multiplying the first term by the last term. So that would be 6 times negative 4, which gives me negative 24. My factors of this number need to add up to negative 10. So number 2, well, I could do negative 6 and positive 4, but that would add up to negative 2, so that doesn't work. I could do 8 and 3, so I could do negative 8, positive 3, but that adds up to negative 5. Could do negative 12 and then positive 2, which would add up to negative 10. So again, the negative 12 and the 2 are going to become my two middle terms. So replacing the negative 10x. So it's going to, our step 3 would become 6x squared minus 12x and then plus 2x minus 4 equals 0. And we're going to factor this expression. So put the first two terms in parentheses. So the 6x squared minus 12x. Put the second two terms in parentheses would be 2x minus 4. What's common between those two terms? Well, they're both divisible by 6 and an x. So I factor out a 6x. That would leave me with just an x in the first term and then a minus 2 in the second term. In my second parentheses, I can factor out a 2, which would leave me with x in the first term and minus 2 in the second term. So now step 5 is to factor out the like expression, which again should be x minus 2. So that means I have x minus 2 times 6x plus 2. And that would be set equal to 0. But you are solving, so for numbers 21 through 26, you're solving. So I have to set each of these parentheses equal to 0. So my first one would be x minus 2 equals 0, and then 6x plus 2 equals 0. First one's easy, gives you x is equal to 2. The second one, I have to move the 2 to the other side. So I have 6x is equal to negative 2. Then divide by 6. So my second answer would be x is equal to negative 1/3. And that would be your result for number 5. Or sorry, for number 22. Now moving on to look at number 23 again, you're going to put the terms in descending order. So this would become 3x squared plus 8x plus 4 equals 0. I'm going to multiply the first and the last term. So 3 times 4, give me 12. So now I need to find the factors of 12 that would add up to 8. So we're trying to add up to this term right here. So let's just do, so 3 times 4, well, that adds up to 7. And then 6 times 2, that adds up to 8. So these two are going to become your two middle terms. You're just going to attach an x to them. So that would become first term 3x squared and then plus 6x, then plus 2x plus 4 equals 0. These are going to be your first parentheses, and then these will be your second parentheses. So 3x squared plus 6x, and then plus, and then 2x plus 4. So you're going to factor in step 4. So what's common between those two terms, which is a 3 and an x. So that would leave you just an x in the first term and then plus 2 in the second term. And this next one, just a 2 is common, so that would leave me with x plus 2. So now your final step of factoring, not for solving, is to factor out the like expression, which would be the x plus 2. And then you're going to multiply that by the 3x plus 2. But because you're asked to solve, you're going to set each of those equal to 0. So I'm going to set x plus 2 equal to 0, and then I'm going to set my 3x plus 2 equal to 0. I'm going to move the 2 to the other side. So I have 3x equals negative 2 divided by 3. And then for this one, I just need to move the 2 to the other side. So I have x is going to be equal to negative 2/3, but also equal to negative 2. So you have two results here for number 23. Now moving on to number 24. So for number 24, before I actually start to solve this one, I'm going to see that if anything divides off of all three of those terms, and there actually is something that divides all three of those terms, and that would be 3 and an x. So before I write it in descending order, I'm going to factor out the 3x, which would make this down to 3x squared, would make the 24x down to 8x, make the 12x down to just 4. So that 3x is kind of separate. We're going to factor the parenthesis right here. So the first step is going to be to multiply the first term by the last term, which would be 3 times 4, which is 12. Oh, wait, we already factored that. The 3x squared plus 8x plus 4. We actually factored that in that last term. So you actually don't have to do all the work for that. It's already factored for us. So this would actually become 3x times x plus 2 times 3x plus 2 equals 0. And we're solving for x. You have to just solve for all three of these things set equal to 0. And I already know what these are going to give me, so I'm just going to set my 3x equal to 0, which means that x is going to be equal to 0 in addition to the two answers that I got in the last equation, which is negative 2/3 and then negative 2. So number 24 was actually tricky. You didn't actually have to do all the work for that because it was basically the same problem as you had for number 23. Now moving on to number 24. So for number 24, I'm going to start by multiplying the first term by the last term, which in this case would be 2 and negative 5. And that gives me negative 10. Oops. I need to find the two factors that are going to add up to negative 3. So I could do negative 10 times 1. But that adds up to negative 9. And really the next one would probably be negative 5 times 2. And that adds up to negative 3, which is what we want. So these two are now going to become your middle terms, replacing the negative 3p. So for number 3, we're going to have 2p squared minus 5p plus 2p minus 5 equals 0. I'm going to separate that into two separate parentheses. So it's going to be 2p squared minus 5p is going to be my first parenthesis. My second parenthesis is just going to be the 2p minus 5. And the only thing that's common within that first term or the first parenthesis would just be a p. So I'm going to factor out a p, and that will leave me with 2p minus 5. And then a 1, and then 2p minus 5, because there's nothing you could factor out of the second term. So you're now going to factor out the like expression, which in this case is going to be the 2p minus 5. So now I have 2p minus 5, and then in the second parenthesis would be the p plus 1. Just like on all the previous problems, you are going to have to solve this. So I'm going to set 2p minus 5 equal to 0, and I'm going to set p plus 1 equals to 0. When I move the 5, I'm going to add it to the other side. So I get 2p equals to 5 and divide by 2. This one I just have to move the 1 to the other side. So my result is p is going to be equal to not only -1, but also positive 5 over 2. Okay. And then number 26, the first thing you have to do is write this in descending order. So this would be 4x squared plus 18x plus 8 equals 0. Step 1 is going to be to set each of the, or to multiply the first and the last term together. So that would be 4 times 8, which is 32. I need to find the multiples of 32 that are going to add up to 18. So I'm going to do 8 times 4. That adds up to 12. So that doesn't work. I could do 16 times 2, which adds up to positive 18, which is exactly what I want. So these two are going to become my middle term, my 16 and my 2. So step 3 is to replace the 18x with 16x and then plus 2x, and to set that equal to 0. Now you're going to separate that into 2 parentheses. So my first parentheses will contain the first 2 terms, so 4x squared plus 16x. Second parentheses is going to contain the 2x plus 8. And you're going to factor. So the thing that divides both of those terms would be 4 and an x. That would leave me with x in the first one and then 4 in the second term. Second parentheses, I can factor out a 2, which would leave me with x plus 4 in the parentheses. So step 5 is to separate that out. So I have an x plus 4, that is going to become my first parentheses. Second parentheses is going to be what's left, so the 4x plus 2. But again, you have to solve for x, so we're going to set 4x plus 2 equal to 0. And then we're going to set the x plus 4 equal to 0. So move the 2 to the other side. Gives me 4x is equal to -2. Divide by 4. So I have x is equal to -1/2. This one I have to move the 4 to the other side. So I get x is equal to -4. Okay, so that concludes all the new problems from lesson 105, but I also want to do number 30 as well, because that problem is one that shapes, and I know how much you guys love shapes. So number 30, it says the area of the triangle is going to be equal to the area of all 3 of those circles added together. The way you find the area of the triangle is 1/2 base times height. And the area of the circle is obviously pi r squared. So I'm trying to solve for height. So I know what the base of the triangle is. It's 3. I don't know the height. That's what I'm trying to solve for. I know the radius of one of the circles is 1. Another circle is also 1. And the other circle is 2. So 1 pi plus 1 pi plus 4 pi. Well, 4 plus 1 is 5 plus 1 is 6. So I have 3 over 2h is equal to 6 pi. So to get the h by itself, all you need to do is multiply both sides by the reciprocal of 2 over 3. The 3 goes into the 6 2 times, so that means my height is going to be equal to 4 pi. And that should conclude everything that you need to know for lesson 105. Please make sure in the comments of this video is where you're going to place all of your questions for 105A. I hope you guys all have a great day. Bye.